welcome
Thank
Katherine
you.
to our podcast.
Thank you very much.
So for the listeners and the viewers out there, do
Yeah.
you want to tell us a bit more about yourself and your background?
Yeah, happily. So my name's Katherine Ray. I run a business called Talentology, and my HR career is really split in two. So I started off doing my degree in psychology, which kind of led me into I'm interested in people in the workplace. And then landed my first role with Diageo doing generalist HR, and spent my time at Diageo, Warner Brothers and Sky in generalist roles. So I've seen the whole employee life cycle, which is what I wanted to do. I wanted to see every aspect from recruiting to reward to developing, and experience that. And then I really started to enjoy the developing people, and that's when I started to specialise and went to join Unilever in a global talent role, and got to work at all ends of the talent side of things. So the top 100, the early careers, and then developing kind of managers' capability to be able to identify talent and then know what to do with it once they'd identified it. So it's been a fantastic career to date, and then really enjoying my work now with Talentology and working with lots of fantastic organisations.
So let's move on to Talentology. What is Talentology, and why did you actually launch the business?
Yeah, great question. So Talentology, if you break down the two words of my company name, ology is a study of something, and talent piece came from my background and the previous 6 years at Unilever, looking at talent at all different kind of angles and perspectives, and just this kind of belief that everyone has a talent, or talents plural, but not everyone is talent. Let me explain that a little bit. I think in organisations we spend too much time just focusing on the top 5 or 10%, which has been something organisations have done for a number of years, for the past 20 years. But there's now a kind of new disruptive kind of school of thought that says, actually, we've got lots of people here. Why don't we try and understand what each and every one brings, as opposed to just try and pigeonhole a few people and try and predict how good they're going to be in the future based on past performance. So it was that, but also this real fundamental belief that I had working in organisations, and now that I see working with lots of organisations, people are an organisation's kind of best asset. And I know that's said a lot, but it really, really is true. And I think times are changing, and organisations are really realising that in order to attract and retain the best people, they need to put their people first. And that's how they're going to grow and succeed. So that's really where it came from.
That leads really nicely into something that you introduced me to, which is this terminology, this phrase, this way of thinking, ikigai.
Yeah.
So do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about ikigai? What is it? Where does it come from? How did you find out about it? What does it actually mean?
Yeah, great. So ikigai is a Japanese phrase. It doesn't literally translate, so it can mean a couple of things: living our life with more meaning, or living a worthwhile life. I came across it because a couple of years ago I got gifted a book by my brother all about ikigai, and knowing what I do, he thought that I'd find it really interesting, and he was certainly right, and I really did. The book is based on some research by a couple of Spanish authors who travelled to Japan because they wanted to find out, in particular parts of Japan, they have the biggest population of people that live beyond 100, and they wanted to find out what is it that enables these people to live to such a great age. And they basically found out that it was down to ikigai, which is comprised of 4 parts. So doing something that you love, that you're really passionate about, doing something that you're good at, so really playing to your strengths, which I really love and do a lot of work in that space. The third is, what can you be paid for? So can you be paid to do something that you're good at and that you love? And then the fourth kind of aspect, which I think in current times is becoming even more important, is what does the world need? What impact can you have doing those other 3 things can you have on the world? And I think that's where lots of organisations are starting to focus. How can we become a more ethical and conscious business to be able to attract and develop the best people? So in summary, if you have all of those 4 things, you're living a kind of meaningful and worthwhile life. They sound easy on paper, but I think a lot of people are all striving to try and achieve that balance in their life.
So I'm really interested about this idea of, companies now needing to have a purpose.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, they're having to change the way the relationships they have with their own employees to be able to demonstrate that to people, because otherwise they can't retain and attract people into the business. So how does what you do sort of drip down into that sort of culture aspect? And because people don't always associate sort of training with culture. How would you explain how that trickles down into the workplace?
It's a really great question, and I think it's not a particularly easy one to answer insofar as culture in organisations is so incredibly complex, because you're dealing with lots of different factors, and you're dealing with kind of history and legacy, you're dealing with the purpose of the organisation, you're dealing with the people that are in the organisation, and also the people that are leading the organisation. I think if I was to pick out one thing that I do that tries to impact culture is around coaching and mentoring. So what we know is that people want greater connection in the workplace more now than ever. And whilst technology is an amazing enabler to help and support people, actually what we know is that people want to have human conversations, and there's a real drive to kind of making workplaces more human. So I think coaching and mentoring really fits into that, which is by getting managers, and particularly middle managers, which I believe are the real game changers in organisations, to adopt a more kind of coaching style and approach through curiosity and listening. Actually, it does a number of things. It kind of creates less dependency, but it also creates curiosity and actually a lot of autonomy. If you were my manager and rather than telling me the answers, you asked me some questions to help me kind of realise what the answers were myself, because I fundamentally know them, that then starts to create a completely different culture where you have people who are thinking for themselves, coming up with ideas, collaborating, being creative, and importantly, innovative. So I think the coaching piece for me is really helpful. I think mentoring also has its place, because the work I do in mentoring in organisations breaks down silos and barriers, and that's ultimately what we want to achieve. We want people to come together and talk to each other from different parts of the business and share knowledge. That's really important with the multi-generations in organisations now. I don't know something, but I know you do. Let's share, let's talk, let's communicate. So I suppose those are the two areas in terms of what I do that try to make the biggest difference in terms of culture, as well as leadership, as well as lots of other things.
It's really interesting, and I think you touched on a subject there about the changing workplace as a whole, and we're definitely seeing movement globally across this idea of what actually is an organisation now, what does it actually mean now. And as you said, we've got a rapidly changing workforce with dispersed work teams as a result of technology, the fact that people don't necessarily want to go into the office anymore. It's a different mindset. We're seeing engagement levels drop globally. They're starting to come back up again, but we're still at pretty horrific figures if you look at the stats coming out of people like Gallup and Mercer and so forth. Where are we on our journey towards where we're going? What is that end destination look like? And is there such a thing as an end destination?
I don't know. I think I would say no, because I think that organisations of the future will need to continually keep up the pace and continually keep up to date. And whilst there are a few organisations that we probably know of who are heralded to be kind of the best place to work, I think it's like all things now. People can't take their eye off the ball. One year you're the best company to work for globally, or in the UK or Europe, wherever it may be. But you have to constantly reinvent yourself and constantly be thinking of ideas to maintain that. So I think that's the answer to that question. I think where we are is, I think organisations are starting to realise that they need to do things differently. It's that I need to think differently and do things differently, otherwise we're going to be left behind. And, competition is fierce. There's startups popping up left, right and centre for services and products that we didn't even think that we needed 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago. So I think the external marketplace is fiercely competitive. That drives competition for talent. And without mentioning kind of those famous words around the war on talent, it is very much an employee-driven marketplace. So I think we've turned a corner, and I think the organisations that are going to do really well are going to be those ones that can really speak clearly about what it is they do and what impact that they want to have. And they have this culture of learning where everybody is valued, whether you are really junior, whether you're really senior. They want people to contribute because they realise the power of the people as opposed to just the senior leaders to come up with all the ideas.
So co-ownership.
Definitely, and accountability. So I'm seeing that a lot in organisations that have really good kind of coaching type cultures. People own their stuff. They come up with the ideas. They're able to go and do something with that. And then it might not work the first time, but there's this culture of, okay, it didn't work. So how do you learn from that? What would you do differently next time? And this constant just trying until you get it right, and just collaborating with people, because we can come up with some really great ideas on our own, but all good ideas come from more than one head, in my experience.
You talked about technology. What place does technology have in the future of work?
I think a huge place. I think people have been scared of it in a way because perhaps they don't understand it. We often scared of things that we don't understand or what it can do. I think where I've seen technology work really well is where it enables. So, we've talked before about, the data that Visibly gathers is human data. It's completed by humans, so it's a snapshot of what people are thinking. And then for me, it's all about then how does that technology or the data collection or the means to collate the data, what do you do with that? That's the important bit for me. So many people probably listening to this have completed employee engagement surveys in their careers, and there's nothing more frustrating when you put the effort into kind of giving your views and your feedback, and then nothing seemingly happens with it. So I think there's a really nice link between kind of the human data and human solution side of things, and importantly then, what is it telling the organisation? Because actually it gives a really clear indication and direction as to where they need to go. And if people see their feedback being actioned, that's incredibly powerful, an incredibly powerful retention tool in my book. So, and technology, not just in terms of data, but just platforms, for people to collaborate, for people to come together. So I think it's great. I think there's a potential where organisations can bring in too much tech and too many things, and people almost get a bit overwhelmed. What platform am I using for what? But I think it's great. I think it's a huge enabler if used in the right way.
And finally, to conclude, I'm going to ask you some sort of snapshot questions off the cuff here.
So, okay, go for it.
So first of all, can you give me a good book that you can recommend to listeners that you think is worthwhile reading? Yeah,
so one that I think I would really recommend is the 100-Year Life by Linda Grattan and Andrew Scott. It's been out for a few years now, but it really talks about how the landscape of life and our careers are changing, and predicting that we're going to be having a 60-year or so career, and what we need to start thinking about at an individual level, but also at an organisational level to prepare for that, because there's going to be so many more kind of transformations and transitions that we're going to have to go through. We're going to have to upskill ourselves more regularly than we have done before, and we need to keep ourselves in good health, both mentally and physically, to be able to lead this 60-year career. So that would be my book choice.
That's a really good one. And then just finally, one word of advice for organisational development practitioners, senior HR people. What would be the kind of one bit of advice you would give those people right now?
Yeah, I think my one piece of advice is I do a lot of work in my coaching around changing mindset. And I think that we are at this point in time where we need to change our mindsets about a few things, and particularly what we know about the future of work, where things are headed. I think we need to change our mindset about how organisations are designed and structured, to enable us to be agile and flexible and adaptable for the future needs. And I think we need to change our mindset about what the career means for the future, because actually the way we're going to engage with people is going to look very differently, I think, in a few years' time. We're not talking kind of 10 years away, I think, within the next few years. So I think it's about, changing our mindset and being okay to think differently about how we do things, and not sticking to but we've always done it this way, so we can't possibly do something different. So that would be my biggest piece of advice.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
It's been great talking to you.
Great.